you all for being here and our appreciation of NIHS for sponsoring this very important activity, and we're looking forward to continuation with additional workshops. And I wanted to open up by thanking the other members of the Standing Committee of the National Academies. The entire list of the committee members is here, and those highlighted, Tom, George, Bill, myself, Marty Stevens, and Lauren Zeisey, were the ones that were the subcommittee organizing this workshop, so you can blame us at the end for not enough lively discussion or for being one-sided one way or the other. And I also wanted to thank and express the appreciation of the staff of the National Research Council, especially Marilee Shelton Davenport, Nella Mantis, and Raka Walter and Keenan Sawyer for all the great work they've done in assisting the subcommittee to put the speakers and the agenda and the organization of this workshop together. And without their excellent help, we'll not be here today. And the government liaisons, I apologize, I'm not listing them. There are very many, more than the committee members. And again, the charge of this entire committee is to facilitate the discussion, and we welcome their suggestions as well as suggestions from others in the audience and member of the public and others who have not been formally participating in this committee work. I wanted to give just a few brief opening remarks to set the stage and to give some housekeeping details and to describe briefly what we're trying to achieve here in the next day and a half. And the work of this committee follows really in the footsteps of a lot of other important work that was done under the auspices of the National Academies of Science, going all the way from the 80s and developing guidance for risk assessment, and then more recent work of the Committee on the Toxicity Testing in the 21st Century, and also the Science and Decision Committee. And again, also there was another similar activity for quite a number of years that just recently wrapped up on looking at toxicogenomics and its applications. That's also highly relevant to the work that we'll be discussing today. And the toxicity in the 21st century really puts the limelight on the type of science and analysis and applications that we'll try to discuss in the next day and a half. And this is one of the tables from this report, which highlights where we used to be, where we are, and where we're going. And the reason I wanted to show this is that a lot of the toxicology in the future and toxicology today is relying on high and medium throughput testing, and there is a great emphasis on in silico screens, on fewer animals, on less time and less expense. And we're hoping that with the lineup of speakers and the panel discussions that we had organized, we'll be able to not only take stock where we were and where we are, but also take a very careful and frank look at where we're going, whether some of these technologies are ready for prime time or what needs to happen. And again, we really don't want to just bask in our own glory here, and we didn't invite the speakers here to present all of their most recent and cool stuff. We really want to have a very frank discussion about the limitations and what needs to happen for this to translate into not only human health sciences, but also regulatory decision making. And there are many different definitions of computational toxicology, and I agree with all of them, and I decided nonetheless to synthesize my own. And basically, I see this as really, nothing else than toxicology embracing additional fields. And toxicologists, even though being, fairly narrow-minded and traditional people, we are now working much more with folks in the technology development and the modeling and computer science and computational chemistry, engineering, statistics, and other fields. And truly computational toxicology is not only multidisciplinary field, which means that it incorporates a lot of different fields in itself, but it's also interdisciplinary, which means that it really makes us not just to collaborate with others, but across the discipline divides, but also try to understand. And because it's interdisciplinary, it's also a great area for training of future toxicologists, because, if Chris says that he's old, I think I'll take offense with that, but folks who are now coming of age and being trained in toxicology, I think they really need to be comfortable with additional areas in research that us and folks in the past may not have been as much. And computational toxicology is, again, in my opinion, is one of those great fields that tries to take data and generate knowledge. And many different fields try to do that. But truly, these high throughput and high content screening assays provide now, like almost never before, enough data for us to be able to put this into the modeling perspective. And now we cannot use the excuse as much as that our model's only as good as the data they have, which meant 5 or 10 years ago very little data. There is now much more data, and now we can use that data. And it also provides a framework for modeling and simulation to validate and, as Chris said, to predict key aspects. And not only key aspects of physiology, us understanding all the model organisms, including humans that we're interested in, but also try to predict and understand toxic and induced pathology. And then finally, this would enable fundamental understanding of complex relationships across biological systems, across scales of organization, and also support scientifically sound process of projecting human health risks posed by chemicals. From the registrants of this workshop, we were very delighted to see a number of important stakeholders all represented here. Even though the use of this information and knowledge will be primarily in the government, and that's why we have all the liaisons from government agencies, and not only in this country, but also, European Union and Asian countries are also thinking very carefully about computational toxicology. But the input comes from academia, from industry, non-governmental organizations, and the general public. And as we have all these representatives in the audience, I encourage speakers and discussants and panelists and people who will be asking questions to not resort into very, deep science speak, but to try to keep the discussion broad enough. Just to give you a couple of housekeeping details on the workshop itself, the subcommittee decided to have two major goals. One goal is to really take stock and try to understand and provide focus for where we are right now, where we've been and where we are. And to do that, we have decided to break this into two major tracks in our discussion that will be based on scientific presentations today. The first one is aimed to address the question, what are the emerging data streams amenable to computational modeling and data mining? And as we decided to not make this a 5-day meeting, but rather a half a day of scientific presentations, we decided to break this into presentations on high throughput and high content screening across scales of biological organization to molecular and cellular scale, tissue scale, and organism scale. And then we'll have two presentations on digitalization and public release and applications of both legacy, meaning historical toxicological data, and also some of the new data streams, such as from sequencing data and gene expression profiling and other omic technologies. And then the second track in the scientific presentations will be on the emerging data analysis and modeling tools. And there we have presentations on computational chemistry, on data mining bioinformatics. We are very sorry that we'll be missing one speaker on in silico modeling from bottoms-up approach, what we call from molecules to cells. And also then we decided to invite a speaker on top-down approach, how we can go from virtual tissues down to understand the intricate molecular biology and inner workings of the pathways. The speakers were asked to give a presentation, and then there will be very short kind of burning question and answer period. After each of these two tracks, we'll have a 30-minute panel discussion. This panel discussion is meant to address more broad questions from the audience, but again, we will have roundtable discussions later on today and tomorrow, and so those 30 minutes are really meant to provide some additional discussion with the presenters. And I would, again, welcome questions from the audience and from our participants who are dialing in. The second goal is to review the practical applications of the new science. Again, as I said, we don't want to just take stock and present where we are. We want to really facilitate the discussion of whether this makes sense and whether this will be usable for people on the front lines who have to make decisions and who may need to use this data, or this data may be the only data that they have to make decisions. And here we'll have two roundtables. One will be this afternoon on scientific questions about computational toxicology. And this is really meant to be a real frank discussion about the value and the challenges and limitations of this science, the costs, the priorities, and how we can translate this technology and be comfortable with it. Again, because this level of comfort with, where the regulators are and where the academic researchers are really not the same thing. And today, hopefully, we'll have that discussion. Tomorrow, we will have a second roundtable on real-world applications of the emerging data and knowledge. And really, we have a lot of representatives and also invited panelists and discussants from the government organizations who are on the front lines and who will have specific questions to address, and then we'll have some broad audience participation as well. So without further ado, I would again like to welcome you all. I'm looking forward to this discussion. This is a subject that is very dear to my heart, and I'm very interested in it myself. Thus, I'm spilling my biases into this and provide proper disclosure.